are literally shaping the planet.
Purpose is the only pathway to a regenerative future.
We have a choice to stay with the status quo or to change.
What is the point of trying to be just resilient when we can actually innovate?
Good afternoon and good morning to those who are participating in the call today. So in the next 30 minutes, John and I are going to be sharing with you some lessons learned on how photogrammetry tied to 2D and 3D design information and project schedule can improve how we do coordination and communication in the field and also remotely in the context of the pandemic. So I've had the pleasure of joining John on this presentation. And I've been working with him for a few years. So I'm going to have John start by presenting to us why he wanted to look into remote monitoring and the opportunity he saw through photogrammetry and visual data. John?
Yeah, our problem it kind of arose out of starting a group that had done laser scanning. So we were doing phase-based laser scanning, and we were turning the data around after registering in roughly a week to 2 weeks' time. And it just wasn't fast enough to be useful to the guys in the field. They also wanted to go forward and backward in time and see what had happened last time we shot versus what's coming at us and do this quicker, faster overlay with modeling. And we struggled in trying to do that with conventional tools. Here we go. We can look at the next slide where this was our old way of working. And when I say old way, it was really just prior to learning the new overlay methods. In this case, we had two-dimensional drawings that were sliced out of a large model. And it was very complicated. We had a lot of error in both documenting progress of work put in place, like pipe installation, and there was also discrepancies. We oftentimes were marking up systems that had yet to be installed incorrectly off of a 2D plan. So this was difficult for us and inconsistent. The new way is much more precise and much more fast. You've got an overlay of underground piping. You can see what it looked like before you backfilled. You can then overlay that with the new design and new systems that are coming. The sequencing is much more real, much more apparent, and again, that speed of looking at it and being able to review this on a tablet out in the field is just incredible. Very helpful.
I learned about this initiative that John had about remote monitoring almost 3 years ago, way before this pandemic happened. And this resonated with our own experience at Reconstruct pretty well. I used to work for a top 10 E&R construction company. In our projects, which used to be around 1,500 projects a year, we had 1 or 2 field engineers sitting in every trailer analyzing daily reports. When you open up these daily reports, you would see that there's not a whole lot of information is really being captured on the job site. But really the intent is to make sure subs, owner, contractors, everybody really understands how much work gets done. And it's part of our owner requirement, right? We have to submit weekly reports in terms of how much work gets done. We never trust this information, not only at the project level, at the entire regional level. So what we do in every single project is we ask every contractor to stand up and color code 2D drawings for a construction management firm project, which is very similar to the projects that John was referring to. What we really wanted to do was to use this feedback to update our schedule. But as that picture from one of the projects I actually used to work on myself, you can clearly see that the P6 schedule happens to be on this corner of the wall, and color coding and the feedback in terms of how much work gets done is being documented in a 2D drawing. So oftentimes people who were on the site, who were removed from the site, were missing this feedback of how much work gets done in the job, so we can use that information to take control actions. This doesn't only apply to one company or two. This is at the entire industry level, where these issues with coordination and communication and what happens in the field and making sure all the stakeholders are on the same page are leading to cost overruns and project delays that we've seen E&R, Dodge, and McKinsey reporting on. The way we wanted to solve this problem was really to tap into the most simple form of communication. If you talk to owners, if you talk to subs, every contractor who's on the job site, if you show them a picture, they would understand immediately what needs to be done and how much work has been done. Images and videos are really that single source of truth that we can use to communicate what needs to be done in the job, and even use that as a feedback to the schedule to make sure the basis of the schedule is being updated. But there are all kinds of visual data. Sometimes we walk around and take pictures with cell phones. Sometimes we use professional photography services. Sometimes we rely on time-lapse photography. Application of video cameras indoors are extremely popular especially with 360 cameras. For the past 5 years, we've seen a surge of drones in construction to the degree that now construction industry is #1 market for drone as a hardware platform. And as John pointed out, laser scanning. We wanted to see if we can tap into all kinds of visual data, but as you can imagine, none of them were really organized in any form or shape, let alone providing that feedback that we wanted to desire to improve the basis of coordination and communication. So we brought this concept up to John. He actually shared with us a very similar story at Walbridge. John?
Yeah, I mean, we had spent time laser scanning, like you see in the upper left there, with a phase-based laser scanner. It was taking us time, and you had to register it. And also we often would get damages done to our scanners. I had the experience firsthand with having a scanner get knocked over in Mexico. And there's also the problem in a steam tunnel with fogging up. And so we had lots of different issues with expensive equipment. And then with drones, it's difficult to fly indoors, and the battery life doesn't really last that long. And there's all kinds of permissions, and some clients just don't allow drones to be flown for other reasons, industrial espionage being one of them. So we were really attracted to this idea of just walking around with a handheld camera where you could really get into an issue quickly. And we've perfected that. I mean, we have a users group where we work hard on these 360 images and trying to always improve the lighting and the way it's captured, and work closely with the Reconstruct staff to make sure we're really getting comprehensive captures going on.
Thanks, John. As you can all see, there are all kinds of reality capture solutions, and there's really not one that would fit all job sites. So what we really wanted to do at Reconstruct is to offer a solution that is agnostic to hardware, and it can work with any type of device and make sure it brings that wealth of information as a feedback to the schedule. So with that, basically, we've been offering a remote monitoring solution for the past almost 5 years now, where we integrate with a number of platforms from Aconex Beam 360 Procore to bring existing project data into our platform. What that means is your images and videos you're capturing with drones, 360 cell phone devices, through the photogrammetry engine that we have at Reconstruct, can automatically transform into a measurable street view experience. An experience that would give you that time machine for construction, that at any point in time, you can see what's happening, you can measure that, and use that for documentation and coordination. The second aspect of our system, and the second workflow that we support, has to do with quality control. What that means is we bring in 62 different file formats of design, 2D or 3D, or the hybrid of the two. So now you can see what is there versus what should be there on the job site. And if you map that out in the context of a schedule, for which we have bidirectional integration with P6, Microsoft Project, or it can be as simple as Excel spreadsheet that you can import into our system, you can see what is there versus what should be there in the context of a schedule. This information is entirely web-based and accessible through mobile phones. What that means is if you are completely 3D, you can log into the system and immediately see what are the locations, tasks, work packages that are on the schedule, and what are the things that are behind the schedule. Our system learns the pattern of production on the job site, and as we contrast what is there versus what should be there, we can use that information to forecast the future. So we can always highlight indoors and outdoors what are the locations that are at risk for potential delays. So when teams are going to a coordination meeting, in terms of reacting to what has happened over the past few weeks, they can plan ahead of time to tap off potential delays from happening. And really the last visual is something we use every day on every job site, where we want to make sure that we can communicate who does what work in which location. We leverage the power of the models and the data that resides behind them, tap that into the schedule so we can plan out for the total quantity of the work that's expected to be done, all mapped into the context of what photogrammetry engine provides us with, which is the reality on the job site. So you can really focus on the task of coordinating and communicating with the most up-to-date information that you have on the job site, whether that has to do with the reality data, the most up-to-date design information, all in the context of the most up-to-date schedule you have on the project. So with that in mind, John and I are going to present you with 3 different workflows. The first workflow is really that visual documentation, getting us started by bringing your images and videos and generating these measurable street view experiences. I mean, we've shown you examples of drones and laser scanning, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have seen many examples of that. So we felt like maybe we can immediately focus on what has been specific to Walbridge initiative and one of the novelties that we have at Reconstruct, which is really tapping into 360 cameras. These cameras are extremely popular, They're probably number one modality of capture in Reconstruct. And what that means is that you can simply turn them on, put them into video capture mode, and just walk around. Walk around without really doing anything on your phone or anything of that nature, videotaping your work location. Reconstruct can automatically transform these videos into measurable 3D models. What you would see is a picture extracted from a video frame, which is measurable with these donuts that you see on the ground that would help you navigate around and go to other frames of the video. On the lower left corner of the viewer that you see on the right side, you would also see a navigation map, a 2D floor plan, also automatically generated from the video. So our engine, regardless of whether you've used Garmin, Insta, Ricoh, or any other type of 360 camera, can automatically give you this experience. And that's because even from 360 videos, we have ability of generating point cloud models. And we do that over a project timeline. So as you create a reality, you can always contrast that against design, whether that's your IFC file, your Navisworks file, Revit, or a federation of all of them. So you can contrast what is there versus what should be there. Here's how that experience would look like. For every location, you'd be sitting at your home office, like many of us that are doing it right now, and we can log into the project level 16s and start clicking around on these donuts that you see on the ground and go from one frame to the other. As we are making these transitions, you can clearly see this sort of street view experience where in the back of the scene, there's a point cloud. Every image that you're looking at is measurable. And that means now, indoors and outdoors, every frame gives you ability to measure angles, measure distance, measure areas, volumes, and track them over time. This can be done with laser scanning point cloud you import. It can be done with the drone data, or it can be done with the 360 video that you see here. For the floor plan, you see the ortho photo that's been automatically generated, and you can use that to guide where you are, or even download that and use that for your tenant improvement or design needs. You can clearly see the frames are mapped. If you bring in your 2D design information, you can also map the reality against that design, so your navigation can be done against a design floor plan, or switch back and forth and go between 2D and 3D. As much as everything that I've shown you is 3D, there's a 2D aspect to the system, so you can run this entirely in 2D. Here, just showing you a quick walkthrough from the point cloud perspective, so you can see even from one video capture for a few minutes, there's a very compelling point cloud that can be generated. You can switch to a 2D viewer, where in the 2D viewer, you can see the design information against the reality. This is also great because you can actually create your issues in 2D and make sure those folks who want to interact with the system from a 3D perspective can go back and forth and see what really happens. Everything in this system is organized around location, so you can go from one location at a time or go back and forth and do this sort of time machine for construction. Design information can be overlaid on the top in 3D or 2D. I showed you the 2D a moment ago. Now we are heading back to one of our images. And if you go to the image, you can immediately interact with it, measure it, or do a beam overlay on top as opposed to side by side. What that means is you can exactly see what is there versus what should be there. The system is entirely interactive, so you can extract, focus, and isolate components, get access to metadata that you've provided in the design, so immediately becomes of use for quality control. What that means is that you can hide and play with the transparency in form of an augmented reality, and now measure the delta between design and reality. So in a moment, I'm going to pull up my measurement tool here after showing you the properties panel, and we can find the delta you see between the design and reality. So again, our measurement is enabled both from a design perspective and also from a reality perspective. Obviously, this can be documented as an issue, or can be sent as a text message to anyone who's in the field so they can actually immediately address the issue that is in hand. So with that in mind, we started deploying this with John, and this is one of John's projects. John?
Yeah, this is a current factory where we're trying to make America great again by gutting a building and converting this into an electrification truck facility. And here we had to raise the roof, renovate existing structure, and a lot of the old design drawings didn't really match what was out in the field in terms of bracing and connections. So some of the features that Monty just showed you became really important to us testing this out in the field and looking at column connections to bridge girts, moment resisting connections, also documentation prior to slab pour, so we could see where the rebar was placed and how dense it would be if we're going to core at a later date. All these things became much more useful to us, because we could measure forward and back in time. So a superintendent maybe who showed up midway through the project he could come on here, and one of the first things he did was look prior to slab pour to see how dense the rebars were placed, to see if we could core in these slabs in the future. So it becomes really useful in photogrammetry to be able to go forward and backward in time. I wanted to also show you an example of drone imagery where we captured a large facility, and you can see the resolution is higher, and we're learning that this can be used for not just claims, like for dewatering in this case, but for also placement and cleanup of site. Is the site ready to receive, in this case it was a data center, we had a lot of large engine generators to be placed, and the suppliers, being able to see this online, had a lot more confidence that we were ready for them and they could deliver or expedite even deliveries and kind of crush the schedule and make it even go faster. And that's what this is all about, and this need for speed. Yeah, so what we're learning is the historical record for people that were coming or being shifted from one site to another. Found this very useful. Being able to measure not just in 3D, but in 2D, especially on a large factory where it's confusing and awkward to look at everything in 3D right away. A lot of times the column lines and getting familiar with things in 2D are where the superintendents like to start with, so they have a base point and they can become confident in what they're looking at. And then we also use it as a basis for future phasing in doing quality control, and then managing the uncertainty in our current situation where not everybody can be on site. And this really ties that communication between the office and the field, especially when the office is remote and disparate in all these different locations. They really feel like they're part of the team because they can do these virtual tours.
Thank you, John. So as you've seen, the second workflow that we support has to do with quality control. And that's when we bring in the design so we can visualize what is there versus what should be there. And to John's point, this can be done completely in 2D, can be done completely in 3D, or the hybrid of the two, where you would have your people who want to interact with 3D, they can use that mode, and your superintendents and foremen can start interacting with the 2D data. John?
Yeah, and so we found this really useful. On the bottom left, you can see those blue circles where the actual captures in the video. And you can see that blue area with a little angle is showing which way you're looking. Again, that gives you that orientation right away. So it helps you, especially in a large factory, to know where you are, especially if you can see column lines marked. And we encourage that to be marked in the model, but sometimes it's not. And this is, again, helping you get orientated and see where you've got to go to mark and pin issues. Yeah, and we also like this feature of looking at reality versus design. So in this case, we had pour blocks. These are large pour blocks that restrain the weight from all that water that's flowing through those pipes. And in the field, the guys are smart and they know what they can form and often adjust these pour blocks to being practical, so it really resists the hammer that could happen through the thrust of the pipe. But when they adjust or do these fine tuning, it's nice from Reconstruct's point of view because we can see that even with a tablet out in the field, what are the other systems it affects when we adjust this pour block? In this case, you can see an overlay of the yellow, which was an easement for all these new lines coming in. The green lines show a new storm coming in and power. And we've got a number of very complex utility systems being installed. And what do those adjustments mean? And what's our leeway in adjusting? The yellow circles indicate access to valves. And there on the right, that circle indicates conduit that's being fed later in a next phase coming over top of that pour block. So you could see that they knew that they could bury the pour block low enough so that conduit could make it in and out of that vault. Just slowly, those little things like that really add a lot of value to the tool in knowing how to do coordination in a much more meaningful way.
Thanks, John. So the last workflow that the remote progress monitoring platform supports is making decisions in the context of the schedule. So if you can visualize what is there versus what should be there, beyond quality control, it can provide that basis of how we can change the sequence of activities, who goes first, what is the right set of trade location that we can envision for the project to keep the project on the milestones that we've communicated and agreed upon. So with that in mind, John, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, we built this switch yard, and the switch yard we knew was going to shut down during the COVID because we had a delay. And so when the delay occurred, we were able visually to show the owner what's happening and what it means when we have things still arriving on site, like in the foreground here, these packaged elements. And the owner had a lot of confidence then when he could tell us to start back up again, because he's visually seeing things get delivered and we're ready to go and we're keeping the site clean. And so even though we had this delay, this was very useful to us. and you can see the timeline and the adjustment. Everything's documented in terms of the delay. It was very, very transparent. Found a lot of usefulness in this for this small switchyard project.
And as you can see, schedule can be tied to the visual data, can be tied to the design data, and it can be done at any granularity. This can be done at a master schedule, or it can be purely your look-ahead plan, or the hybrid of the two. So again, you can roll up and down and use that for part of your decision making.
Yeah, and in this case, we've got a tablet. We installed piping that went in the ground, feeding in and out of this energy plant. And then the owner had subsequent trades that were going to follow us. And so we could get them orientated by bringing them on a site tour and then showing them with the tablet and not wearing a very expensive augmented reality headset, but it's like a poor man's AR that you could see, you get your positioning exactly where pipes were underground. And they found that extremely useful and it built up a lot of confidence in where they were going to go with their sequencing of future pipe installations underground and above ground. So let's talk about the return on this. Early in the presentation, we told you how much time we took to really scan. And so we documented a full-time person scanning and how long it takes versus doing photogrammetry solutions, which you can see are 1/6 of the time. But the real benefit is when you start looking at the processing. The manual work to process. We're using automated routines now with AI and Reconstruct that's automatically registering the data. That is a huge time savings for us, and you can see on the slide. But beyond these obvious indications, we found time documenting work put in place. As I said, it was taking a day and a half a week for a guy, and we're able to reduce that and crush it to under 2 hours for documenting, but much more accurate without error. And then in our steam tunnel study recently, we found that we could see what existing impacts were going to cause to fabrication, and we could catch that before the pipes were made. So a lot of the prefabrication errors that would normally occur on the job were straightened out and streamlined for installation of steam piping and tunnels. It really became much more valuable than what even the slide indicates.
And as John pointed out, and we mentioned before, there's really not one solution that will fit all job sites. And we've always been on the same philosophy that if you have scanning, you probably want to use that for flatness, plumbness measurement, and things that require high precision measurement. And you can import that into Reconstruct. If you want to do high frequency documentation in a form that is measurable, you can also do that with Reconstruct in combination with 360. So you can bring the best of the two worlds together to support various workflows that you have in mind.
Yeah, and so if you look at this in the mission critical decisions and their value, what is there versus what you think is there? A lot less time is consumed for executives traveling to and from, and especially in our current situation, a lot of our travel has been cut back, but we've seen a lot of cost savings and less need to travel by doing these virtual tours. We're also able to adjust and proactively improve quality. In fact, this average of $20,000 a month has easily been achieved on our steam tunnel projects, where we often saved a considerable amount of time by catching errors and showing the things that reality includes inside of steam tunnels that the designers never even had access or exposed to. And then visually tracking and revising schedule in today's new normal much quicker and much faster, even 4 times as fast is easily been achieved, and $25,000 a month in full-time employee savings. This has been very quick and useful to us for doing schedule updates.
Yeah, so all there is to it is to tap into your existing visual data and bring that into a form that is measurable against the design, so you can make your decisions remotely for quality, for progress, understand risk, and manage your projects. So with that, hopefully we've shown you some of the ways by which photogrammetry is adding value to how we're coordinating and communicating what work gets done in the field, and how we can use that data to measure progress and risk. Any questions?
Yeah, so if anyone from the audience has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat. And we'll have John or Mani run through them.
One of the questions we're often asked is, how long have we been using these tools? And we started our journey about 2.5 years ago. And most recently, we've been improving inside of lighting, tunnel areas, and darkly hidden mechanical rooms. We've really tried to improve how we do lighting when we do video capture.
Yeah, I still remember one of our earlier projects with John where even operating drones for outdoors was not an option, given that the owner had some security concerns. So one of the conversations that we had was to see if we can expand the application of 360 videos for outdoor mapping of earth moving operations and underground utilities. And I'm very glad that with John, we've been able to devise this workflow on how this can actually be used every day for mapping underground utilities and earth moving.
Yeah, often we're restricted from flying drones at all. And so it worked out, I think, mutually beneficial to be able to use photogrammetry handheld solutions. We have experimented with robots at the University of Michigan with Cassie and others, but we have found that still to be pretty expensive compared to just manual capture at this time.
I think there's a question asked in terms of the cost and integration. We are always in this philosophy that our platform is meant for communication. So this is really subscription at the project level, and you would use that with unlimited user access to make sure everyone can benefit from it. And it's almost unlimited data too, when it comes to how you would be able to consume. Some job sites, maybe you want to document every day. Some job sites, maybe you want to document once a week. In terms of integrations, yes, again, because we've always been on this philosophy of leveraging existing data, integration has always been important to us. We have integration with Oracle, a number of different products. We're the only company that has a bi-directional integration to P6 Cloud. We have integration with Aconex, and we also have integration with Autodesk BIM 360 and Procore platform. On the data side, on single sign-on, and a few other ways by which you can bring your data and leverage our ability of generating one single source of truth of design against reality.
We've learned that there is a cost, internal cost that you need to budget as well. So if you're thinking of the cost from the vendor, which is a monthly cost or based on how long or duration or size, you also have your internal cost, which you may already have in your general conditions budgeted time to do photo capture. So if you can build on that, then you also need to have some time in preparing the information, pinning it, and registering it prior to a meeting. So you want to think that through, and we use a gated process to make sure people understand, oh yeah, not only do I need to put people on this, and usually a buddy to make sure the guy taking pictures stays out of trouble, but you need to have time interacting with the scheduler and maybe even the coordinator in pinning issues and getting them aware of things and getting them to use it. So you want to think that through all the way, and it may not be a lot of cost, but more commitment in getting the team to adopt and use the tool. There's another question on BIM 360. Mani, if you want to talk about that.
So I think the question is more on how long it took to do the integration. So I'm not sure if the question is more on the development side or how it's used. I'll try to answer it from both perspectives. On the usage, I mean, literally you go to your BIM 360 account and you would activate our app. Our app is publicly available on BIM 360 integration, and it works both for US servers and EMEA servers that BIM 360 supports. So if you're an admin, or I think Autodesk calls it also power user, either one of those, for any project, this would literally take you a few seconds to log into your BIM 360 account, activate it, come back to Reconstruct, tie that project, done. Then the data would be integrated immediately.
So integration from a user's perspective is pretty seamless. We have had trouble with multiple syncing going on with BIM 360. So if you want to make sure who's administering BIM 360 and take that over as well as administering Reconstruct. If you can be the same entity, it's going to be much easier. But if you have a design partner that's administering BIM 360, you may want to set up your file naming and folder structures and all that so it's easy for someone looking at BIM 360 to understand, oh, those are the files that I can turn off and on and Reconstruct, vice versa. You just want to make sure there's a naming convention similar to any BIM execution plan.
That's great, John, Mani. I don't see any other questions, and we are actually officially out of time. So that will wrap up your panel. Thank you so much. That was a really great conversation, and I'm glad that we got to address a lot of key points. I mean, this solution is so timely right now. I think it's hopefully you've seen a lot of acceleration. I think you spoke to a little bit of it, but I think you'll continue to see that in the coming months and years, hopefully. So best of luck with everything, and thank you again for attending.
definitely.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Our contact information is at the bottom of the screen. So if you have any questions or if you want to know more about the tool or the way we've used it on Walbridge projects, please let us know.
Yeah, and Monty and John, please join our Slack group. And if any attendees have questions, either right now or potentially tomorrow, feel free to just drop them in Slack, and you can find them both in there.
Certainly.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.